Hello everyone, how's it going? Welcome to Crack a Pack a Day. Every day, I'm going to open a booster pack of Magic the Gathering cards and evaluate the contents, choosing one of them to take, as if I were taking part in a draft, and this was pack 1, pick 1. Today, we're going to be opening a pack of Battle for Zendikar, so let's crack it and take a look. Our first card is Altar's Reap, an instant for 1 and a black. As an additional cost to cast it, you have to sacrifice a creature. Draw 2 cards. For the most part, this is a 2 for 2. You're losing a card in hand and a card on the board to draw 2 new ones at instant speed. That's not the best deal, especially since you'll have paid 2 lots of mana for the privilege. On the other hand, this can be used in response to your opponent's removal, sacrificing the target of a spell that would otherwise kill or exile the creature anyway. Alternatively, if you have a lot of token makers, you could use one of the tokens that get produced, so you're not sacrificing a creature that's worth a full card. Overall, this isn't a great card, but it does have some uses. It's not really good enough to want to take it first though. Plummet is an instant that costs 1 and a green. Destroy target creature with flying. Plummet has too narrow a selection of targets to ever want to put it in your main deck. If your opponent has no creatures with flying, then this would be a dead card in your hand. Plummet is a sideboard card, and, as such, not worth considering here. Paladar Cub is a 2/2 cat beast for 1 and a white. You can sacrifice it to destroy target enchantment. As a 2/2 for 2, this is a good card right off the bat. The fact that it comes with an upside, albeit a marginal one, is a bonus. Whilst I can't think of many strong enchantments in the set, if your opponent does play one, then you can at least do something about it. Overall, this is a quite solid card, but I don't think I'll be taking it first if I can help it. Goblin War Paint is an aura for 1 and a red. It enchants a creature, which gets +2/+2 and has haste. Like most auras, this suffers from the weakness that using it means your opponent can get a 2 for 1 by killing the creature it's cast on. I don't think Goblin War Paint is really strong enough to consider playing in spite of that weakness. Most of the time, you're either going to play this on a smaller creature that you cast in the same turn, or else miss out on using the haste that the card grants. All in all, I'm not a fan of this card, and I won't be taking it. Scour from Existence is an instant for 7 colorless mana. Exile target permanent. Whilst this is a powerful effect, you're paying a high price for it. It's also inefficient, as most of the targets you're going to want to get rid of are likely going to cost less than the 7 mana you use to cast this. Generally, this should be viewed as a sideboard card, brought in only if your opponent has a more controlling deck with some larger creatures. Against an aggro deck, or even some slightly faster mid-range decks, this is going to be a dead draw. As a sideboard card, I won't be picking it first. Tadgiroux Beastmaster is a 5/5 elf warrior ally for 5 and a green. It has a rally ability, so whenever it or another ally enters the battlefield under your control, creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. This seems like a nice card to have at the top end of your ally deck. You're never going to turn down a 5/5 for 6 unless you've got a super aggressive deck, and the ability to give a bonus to your entire team is nice. I can see a situation where you're racing your opponent. You cast this to give your entire team a nice little boost when they attack, and still have a 5/5 back to block your opponent's biggest threat, swinging the race in your favor. Overall, I think this is a pretty solid card, though it's not really good enough for me to want to contemplate taking it first. Wave Wing Elemental is a 3/4 elemental for 5 and a blue. It has flying and a landfall ability, so whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, this creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. A 3/4 with flying for 6 is a little weak. The body is good overall, but paying 6 mana for it makes it not very efficient. By the time you cast this, your opponent may well be casting 6 6s. The landfall ability feels powerful, making the body into a 5/6 with flying, but you're not going to be able to trigger it all that often after you've cast this. At that point, you're probably relying on drawing lands off the top of your deck, which can be unreliable. Overall, this feels okay, but it's going to have a lot of variance. I wouldn't feel too comfortable taking this first, but I would do so in a very weak pack. Evolving Wilds is a land. You can tap it and sacrifice it to search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. Usually, Evolving Wilds is a card used to ensure that you have access to enough multiple colors of mana to cast your spells, and it does that job wonderfully here. Possibly more importantly, it can also be used to splash 1 or 2 additional colors for the purposes of Converge. In Battle for Zendikar, it's also one of the few ways to trigger landfall on your opponent's turn, or at instant speed in the middle of combat. Unlike the other ways you can do this, you'd have to have it on board already, so it's not a hidden trick that you can surprise your opponent with. On the other hand, the threat of activation can make your opponent more wary about what actions they take. It's also a way of triggering landfall twice in your own turn, if you want. If you've got some of the creatures with landfall triggers that give them a big bonus, then triggering it twice in one turn could be powerful enough to help win the game. Overall, this is reasonable mana fixing with some additional upsides in this specific draft environment. But I don't think it's quite good enough to consider picking first. Silent Skimmer is an 0/4 Eldrazi drone for 3 and a black. It has Devoid, flying, and whenever it attacks, the defending player loses 2 life. This is a bit of a weird card. It's almost like a 2/4 with flying, but the damage is unblockable. Note that since it's loss of life and not actual damage, it can't be redirected to a planeswalker, which is a minor strike against it. The 4 toughness is nice, as it'll help it avoid some forms of removal, as well as being able to be a good blocker if necessary, especially with flying. Overall, this feels like a solid card that can help win a game on a stalled out board. I don't think it's quite good enough to want to take first though. Rush of Ice is a sorcery for a blue. Tap target creature, which doesn't untap during its controller's next Untap Step. It also has Awaken 3 for 4 and a blue. This is an okay card, though not fantastic. Locking down a creature for 2 of your turns and 1 of theirs is okay, especially at a cheap cost like this. The Awaken ability helps here too, as you'll get a kind of temporary 2 for 1 out of the card. If your opponent has only 1 blocker and you cast this on turn 6 or later, then you can swing in with your whole team, as well as your new 3/3 land creature, and possibly win the game. This would go best in an aggressive deck, but I feel that there are some better alternatives available. I don't think this card is worth picking first. Our first uncommon is Royal's Retribution, an instant for 3 white. It deals 5 damage, divided as you choose among any number of target attacking or blocking creatures. This is a pretty powerful card. It's best on turn 5, but can still help out slightly later than that, though it obviously won't be able to do anything against your opponent's biggest threats. Being able to spread the damage out over multiple creatures means that you can get a 2 for 1. Theoretically, you might be able to go as high as a 5 for 1, but I don't think that's terribly likely. Overall, this is a powerful removal spell and might be my pick today. Void Attendant is a 2/3 Eldrazi processor for 2 and a green. It has Devoid and an activated ability, you can pay 1 and a green and put a card an opponent owns from exile into that player's graveyard to put a 1/1 colorless Eldrazi Scion creature token onto the battlefield. It has sacrifice this creature, add 1 to your mana pool. A 2/3 for 3 isn't a great deal, so you'd hope to get a good ability to make up for it. In this case, Void Attendant's ability is actually a pretty powerful one. Being able to turn your excess mana and your opponent's exiled cards into Scion tokens is great. You're affecting the board in a meaningful way, and those Scions can be used to ramp you up in later turns. One subtler benefit of this card is that you don't need to have exiled cards in order to cast it. Most of the processors require you to process cards when they enter the battlefield, but Void Attendant doesn't. So you're never in a situation where you have to delay playing this card to get the most out of it. Overall, as long as you have some exile effects in your deck, this is an extremely solid card that both gives you immediate benefits as well as long-term ones. There's actually a chance I might pick this first. Bane of Balaget is a 7/5 Eldrazi for 7 colorless mana. Whenever it attacks, defending player exiles 2 permanents he or she controls. In the second worst case scenario, you cast this card and attack with it. Your opponent exiles 2 permanents, then double blocks the Bane to kill it. By my calculations, that's a 4 for 1, which isn't bad value at all. The worst case scenario is, of course, that it gets killed or exiled before it can attack. Generally, I think this is a good card. Without any ramp, you can probably expect to hit 7 mana on around turn 10 or 11, so you'd probably want to have some ramp in your deck before taking this. Overall, this feels like a nice way to devastate your opponent's board, though one you'd probably rather take later due to needing ramp. I'm probably not going to take it, pack one pick one. Our rare is Desolation Twin, a 10/10 Eldrazi for 10 colorless mana. When you cast it, you put a 10/10 colorless Eldrazi creature token onto the battlefield. If 7 mana was difficult to come by, 10 mana is a completely different beast. Taking this card first entails that you force yourself into a heavy ramp strategy, because there's almost no way that you're going to be casting this without any help. If you do manage to cast it, then you've probably won the game. 2 10/10s are going to be incredibly difficult to remove if your opponent doesn't know that they're coming, and even if they do, then it's probably going to take 2 separate spells to do so. Even if the spell gets countered, you still get a 10/10 token, as that triggers off of casting, not when the creature enters the battlefield. Overall, I feel this is a powerful card, but it's going to be incredibly difficult to get into play. I'd rather not take this pack one pick one, because it'll be a wasted pick if I can't get enough ramp. We also have a Plains and a Plant token. So, let's have a quick review of all the cards in our pack. To me, today's choice boils down to Royal's Retribution or Void Attendant. For the most part, you're going to want to kill the creatures attacking or blocking you more than the ones that don't. On the other hand, Void Attendant has a reasonable body, doesn't care whether or not you've got exiled cards already, and can both add new bodies to the board as well as help ramp you into the later stages of the game. I think Void Attendant is my pick here. It's flexible, seems to be good in most stages of the game, as long as you've got some ways to exile cards, and helps you cast bigger creatures if you happen to pick some up later in the draft. Void Attendant is my pick. And that's about all we've got time for today. If you disagree with my choice, then please let me know in the comments below, on Facebook, or on Twitter. Have a good day now.